We are in the throes of fascism. Due process has been eliminated. Students across the United States continue to be kidnapped by Trump's Gestapo and threatened with deportation for doing nothing more than exercising their First Amendment right. Their First Amendment right exercised to call for an end to the genocide being committed against the Palestinian people by the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel that has bought a lot of our members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat. Through AIPAC, a pro-Israel lobbying group, an agent of the Israeli government that has had huge amounts of power and influence over our own government. While politicians who speak out against AIPAC experience smear campaigns and suppression of their own political careers, Donald Trump's administration is now working with the fascist state of Israel to implement fascist control, suppress and punish dissent, and use propaganda to manufacture consent of their genocidal efforts. While the innocent men, women, and children of Gaza continue to be systematically slaughtered, Donald Trump continues to give support to the state of Israel and its genocidal Benjamin Netanyahu, and in that support has repeatedly expressed his intention to ethnically cleanse Gaza and turn it into a tourist destination built on his idolatry, with Netanyahu himself concurring that that is the plan. Remember the signal chat that was leaked discussing the bombings of Houthi rebels in Yemen? Well, the United States carried out those bombings to help Israel and their blockade of Gaza, as the Houthi rebels are currently in naval conflict in their efforts to provide aid to the Palestinian people. But Israel, the nation that continues to purposefully murder journalists and aid workers, obviously do not want aid provided to the Palestinian people.
This video challenges Israel's account of why its soldiers open fire with such deadly force. It's just before dawn, and the Red Crescent paramedics and civil defense workers are answering a call to help the wounded near Rafah. Israel's military first said this convoy advanced suspiciously towards troops with the lights switched off. But you can see, these are marked vehicles and they're wearing reflective uniforms. Then, without warning, this. The shooting continues for more than 5 minutes. The paramedic who's filming says his last prayers. Refat Redwan was one of 15 killed.
But Yemen, along with many other nations across the world, continue to show out an overwhelming protest and solidarity with the Palestinian people. Israel have been employing waves of artificial intelligence on social media to spread propaganda, argue with critics, and suppress dissent against their interests.
After investigation reported that social media was used by Israel to recruit, quote, digital soldiers. Those fake accounts were posing as concerned American citizens, apparently urging lawmakers to continue funding Israel's military.
On TikTok and other social media, there has been a suppression and outright removal of the hashtag freepalestine. And now, the United States has claimed they will start monitoring the social media of immigrants and students for what they claim to be anti-Semitism, when we know what that really means is just anything that criticizes Israel or calls for the freedom of the Palestinian people. Columbia University grad student Mahmoud Khalil was kidnapped without a warrant by ICE in front of his 8 months pregnant wife for leading pro-Palestinian protests that brought Jewish students and Palestinian students together in protest. And after his arrest, Jewish students were on the front lines protesting his unlawful imprisonment and continue to do so. It was Jewish students that shut down Trump Tower in protest of this violation of rights. But the media would rather repress those stories than show you, just like the media refuses to show the people of Israel themselves protesting against the genocide being committed by their own government.
Israelis say measures like these put the country's democracy at risk.
I'm here to stay to make it clear to the Israeli government that their actions to ruin the Israeli democracy and leave the hostages in Gaza will not pass.
On Saturday night, thousands of Israelis turned out in Tel Aviv for what's described as the biggest protest in recent months. It was the first of the weekly demonstrations against the government since its decision to renounce the ceasefire and return to its bombing campaign.
Because this is not about fighting anti-Semitism. It's the opposite. It's the violent conquest for nationalist religious supremacy. Something that is beginning to take hold in the United States as we witness the Trump regime pushing policy and executive order to promote Christian supremacy in America and eradicate anti-Christian bias. These developments we have been seeing that eliminate due process and threaten our rights in our democracy are not slippery slopes. They are a free fall off of a steep cliff dive into a culture of Nazism. The students that have been illegally and unconstitutionally imprisoned for exercising their freedom of speech have been the subject of lies and propaganda to assassinate their characters and manufacture consent for their wrongful imprisonment and deportation. They aren't being charged with any crimes. They are wrongfully being labeled terrorists with no proof or trial. Trump threatened to cut federal funding to universities, including Columbia, unless they cracked down on the pro-Palestinian sentiment. At an off-the-record meeting with journalism students, Dean of Columbia Journalism School Jelani Cobb and Professor Stuart Carl addressed the concerns of the journalism students about Trump's attack on the university and the detainment of Mahmoud Khalil. Carl warned students with foreign visas, saying, "If you have a social media page, make sure it is not filled with commentary on the Middle East." When a Palestinian student objected, Cobb said, "Nobody can protect you. These are dangerous times." Over 300 students have had their visas revoked, with many leaving the country, but many more students have followed in the wake of Mahmoud Khalil, being detained indefinitely in for-profit detention camps with no due process, all for speaking out against genocide that the United States is aiding in. Since October 7th, 2023, more than 62,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza and the West Bank, with around 18,000 of them being children. About 18,000 children since October 7th, 2023 have been killed in Israel's genocide of Palestine. About 80% of the Gaza Strip is under evacuation orders, and those displaced live in tent shelters. There are about 2.3 million people living in the Gaza Strip, in one of the most densely populated places in the world. It is an open-air prison, subject to Israeli blockade for 16 years, where the airspace and waters are controlled by Israel, while Israel restricts the movement of goods and people in and out. While students who are legal U.S. residents are being kidnapped and faced with deportation without due process, more deportations are being unlawfully carried out on immigrants, many of them also legal U.S. residents. We all know by now about the 200 Venezuelan men who were sent to a slave labor concentration camp in El Salvador that is known for being one of the most overcrowded and inhumane imprisonments in the world. Federal courts ordered them not to be reported, but the Trump administration did what they have been doing and continue to do. They ignored the order of federal courts and sent them there anyway. They were profiled and sent there with no charge and no due process, and were labeled terrorists and gang members with no evidence. 60 Minutes did some investigating and found that
22% of the men on the list have criminal records here in the United States or abroad. The vast majority are for nonviolent offenses like theft, shoplifting, and trespassing. About a dozen are accused of murder, rape, assault, and kidnapping. For 3% of those deported, it is unclear whether a criminal record exists. But we could not find criminal records for 75%.
75% of the Venezuelan men sent to this slave labor concentration camp had absolutely no criminal history. And many of these men were asylum seekers and work permit holders who were legally allowed to be in the U.S. and were in the midst of the legal immigration process. But the Trump regime deported them anyway. Not the worst of the worst, not criminals, not illegals, innocent working class people. And then the Trump administration and its state media mouthpiece Fox News does what it always does, lies to its constituents about what's really happening. Of the men sent to El Salvador is Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
In a couple of months, we have become a country where people are just being grabbed off the street, accused of crimes, and then sent to a foreign gulag without any due process or evidence or even charges. The most egregious, chilling example, of course, is that of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who first came to the U.S. in 2011 as an undocumented 16-year-old sent by his mother because he'd been pressured to join a violent gang in his native El Salvador. In 2019, you'll recall that was during the first Trump administration, an immigration judge gave Garcia a protected immigration status, saying his life would be in danger if he were forced to return to El Salvador. And since then, Garcia has lived and worked here legally. He married an American woman. They started a family together in Maryland. Last month, after picking up his 5-year-old son who has special needs, Garcia was grabbed by ICE. And then within days, they had shipped Garcia off to CICOT, the Salvadorian gulag, along with hundreds of others caught in Trump's roundup. Now, he's never been charged with any crime. ICE has maintained he's a member of the MS-13 gang, but they've offered no proof in any court. He and his family says he has no ties to any gang. And that family, left to wonder now, will they ever see him again?
My name is Jennifer. I am Kilmar's wife. He is a father, a son, a brother, and a proud member of CASA and SMART Union member who has dedicated himself to make our family's American dream reality. That dream was shattered on March 12th when he was abducted and disappeared by the United States government in front of our 5-year-old child.
The Trump administration called his deportation and imprisonment in the El Salvador slave labor concentration camp an administrative error. The Supreme Court unanimously instructed the Trump administration to return Garcia to the U.S., but Trump's Department of Justice wrongfully claims that the court has no authority to force the Trump administration to return him.
President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, Washington suggested that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
You could release him inside of Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing him. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country.
Continue to double down on the lies and propaganda to justify their wrongdoing. Because Trump doesn't want to bring an innocent man back. He wants to further what he's been doing his entire political career. Normalize one atrocity that will make way for the next, as he and his oligarch class consolidate wealth and power to implement authoritarian control. The deal Trump made with the dictator of El Salvador was to also send American citizens to the concentration camp, and Trump has spoken about wanting to do so time and time again. So if the Trump regime can disappear legal U.S. residents just for saying or thinking things he doesn't like, he's prepared to do the same for absolutely anyone.
Homegrowns are next. The homegrowns. You better build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's right.
Now is not the time to be silent. Now is not the time to turn the other way while your neighbors are being taken from their homes for speaking out against the atrocities being committed by our own nation. That is exactly how the Nazis rose to power, by too many people burying their heads in the sand because they didn't think it would affect them, while other human beings suffered the worst fates because of their complicity. Join us and speak out before it becomes too late, because whether you believe it or not, if you let fascist authoritarianism rise from your own complacency, it will come for you too, because eventually it comes for everyone. It is violent, it is hateful, and it hinders on its desperate need to cling to control. And when it comes for you, you will have no say in the matter unless you fight right now to destroy it before it completely takes hold. Do not despair. Do not crawl into apathy because you think it's more comfortable. On April 19th, there will be another nationwide protest. Go to as many of the protests as you can. Put forth an effort and invite others. Organize in your communities, build relationships and resources. Stay informed and inform others. Have the hard conversations with those who remain unconvinced. Fight to leave a better world for the next generation. When your children or your children's children are one day learning about these atrocities in the history books, and they ask what you were doing when all of this was happening around you, what will you be able to say? History will judge the complicity. How will it judge you? Join the fight, because none of us are free until all of us are free.